"She's just the help," his mother said. The words, spoken in crisp, dismissive Korean, sliced through the opulent air of the private dining room. They were not meant for her to hear, but in the sudden, expectant silence, they echoed like a gunshot. Lena froze, the heavy silver coffee pot in her hand suddenly feeling like a lead weight. Her gaze was fixed on the polished mahogany of the table, on the glint of crystal and the pristine white of the starched linen. She could feel a dozen pairs of eyes on her, the collective stare of the Kwan dynasty and their closest associates, a silent, unified judgment. They were eagles, and she was a field mouse caught in the open. A flush of heat crawled up her neck, hot and shameful. She was just the help. It was a fact. It was the uniform she wore, the task she was performing. But hearing it spoken with such venom by the woman whose son had held her last night as if she were the most precious thing in the world was like being doused in acid. Across the table, Kwon Ji-hoon had gone utterly still. Lena didn't dare look at him, but she could feel the change in the room's atmosphere, the sudden drop in temperature. The air crackled, charged with a new and dangerous energy that emanated from him alone. The polite, strained chatter died completely. Forks were laid silently on plates. Then he stood up. The simple movement was an explosion in the suffocating quiet. His chair scraped back against the marble floor, a harsh, grating sound. He was a tall man, and his presence, always formidable, now seemed to fill every inch of the cavernous room. He said nothing. He simply stood, his impeccably tailored suit jacket falling perfectly around his lean frame, his hands loose at his sides, and the room, which had already fallen silent, went quiet on a level Lena had never known. It was a weighted, terrified quiet. It was the quiet of men who knew violence, who understood power not as a concept but as a physical force, witnessing its sudden and terrible awakening. It was the quiet that fell before the storm broke. Lena finally risked a glance. His face was a mask of cold fury, his jaw set so tightly a muscle jumped along its edge. But his eyes, dark and bottomless, were fixed on his mother. It was not the look of a disappointed son. It was the look of a king whose authority had been challenged. And in that moment, Lena understood that this was not a family dinner. It was a court. 3 months earlier, that court had been the furthest thing from her mind. Lena Park's world was a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Queens that smelled perpetually of her roommate Chloe's incense and the garlic from the restaurant downstairs. It was a world of worn-out sneakers, of counting tips at 3 in the morning, of a debt that felt like a physical weight strapped to her back. She worked 2 jobs, a day shift, waitressing at a greasy spoon diner called the Daily Grind, and weekends catering for a high-end agency that sent her into the gilded cages of Manhattan's elite. It was a life of exhaustion, a constant grinding battle against bills and her own fatigue. Her dream, a small, quiet bookstore filled with worn paperbacks and cozy chairs, felt less like a goal and more like a fantasy, something to whisper to herself in the dark before sleep claimed her for a few precious hours. She was resilient because she had no other choice. She was wary because her life had taught her that nothing good came for free, especially not from the world of people who hired caterers for a Tuesday night. Kwon Ji-hoon's world did not contain greasy spoons or cramped apartments. His world was one of silent, deferential bows, of boardrooms where his quietest word could shift fortunes, of a legacy forged in the shadows of South Korea's rapid industrialization. His family, the Kwons, were more than just wealthy. They were a power unto themselves. Their business, the Hanil Group, had legitimate fronts in shipping, technology, and construction, but its roots and a significant portion of its current operations were sunk deep in the morally gray, often explicitly criminal, underworld. It was a world Ji-hoon had been born to inherit. He felt the weight of it every day, a crown of thorns disguised as a birthright. He was 32 years old and had never made a single choice that was entirely his own. His life was a series of duties, of expectations, of moves and countermoves in a game he hadn't asked to play. He was respected, feared, and devastatingly, completely alone. His loneliness was a constant companion, a cold space beside him in his sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, a silence that even the most expensive sound system couldn't fill. He moved through life with a practiced, decisive grace, his face a handsome, impenetrable mask. The only hint of the violence that underpinned his existence was a thin, white scar that cut through his left eyebrow, a relic from a negotiation that had gone sour in his youth, usually hidden by a stray lock of his dark hair. Their worlds collided on a Tuesday. For Lena, it was just another gig, a gala for the launch of some new tech subsidiary of a company she couldn't pronounce. She was tasked with circulating through the glittering crowd with a tray of champagne flutes, her face set in a polite, neutral smile that was beginning to make her cheeks ache. The room was a sea of designer gowns and bespoke suits, of jewels that could have paid off her family's debt 10 times over. She felt invisible, a functional part of the scenery, and she preferred it that way. Ji-hoon was standing on a mezzanine overlooking the main hall, his loyal second-in-command, Min-jun, at his side. He was bored. These events were a necessary performance, a display of the legitimate face of the Kwan Empire. He nodded at the appropriate times, shook the right hands, and listened to the endless sycophancy with a fraction of his attention. The rest of his mind was on a shipping container that had been flagged in Rotterdam, a problem that would require a more direct solution later in the week. And then he saw her. She was moving through the crowd below, a simple black dress, a tray of champagne. There was nothing outwardly remarkable about her. She wasn't the most beautiful woman in the room, not in the lacquered, sculpted way of the heiresses and models that populated his world, but something in the way she moved, a quiet efficiency mixed with a palpable weariness she couldn't quite hide, caught his eye. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and a stray strand had fallen across her cheek. As he watched, she paused for a moment, her professional smile faltering as she blew the strand away with a soft, exasperated puff of air. The world stopped. For Kwon Ji-hoon, a man who had seen and done things that would make other men's hair turn white, this small human gesture was a cataclysm. The noise of the party faded to a dull roar. The shimmering lights blurred into a meaningless haze. All he could see was her. He felt a jolt, a shocking electric current that seemed to bypass his brain and strike directly at his heart. It was a feeling so alien, so powerful, it almost brought him to his knees. It was as if he had been living his entire life in black and white, and suddenly he was seeing color for the very first time. "Sir?" Min-jun's voice broke through the spell. "Are you all right?" Ji-hoon didn't answer. He couldn't tear his eyes away. He watched her offer a glass to a portly councilman, her smile back in place but her eyes distant. He saw the strength in her posture, the exhaustion she held at bay. He saw a resilience that felt more real than all the polished power in the room combined. "Find out who she is," Ji-hoon said, his voice quiet, almost rough. It was not a request. Min-jun, who had known Ji-hoon his entire life, looked from his boss's intense, focused expression down to the woman on the floor. He raised an eyebrow slightly, but said nothing. He simply nodded. "Yes, sir." Lena felt a prickling on the back of her neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. She scanned the room, her eyes briefly flitting up to the mezzanine. She saw him then, a tall, dark-haired man in a suit that probably cost more than her car. He was staring at her, not in the leering way she was used to from entitled guests, but with an unnerving predatory intensity. A shiver, not entirely unpleasant but deeply unsettling, ran down her spine. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. His were dark, sharp, and they seemed to see right through her professional facade, down to the tired, struggling girl beneath. She broke eye contact immediately, her heart hammering against her ribs. She busied herself, rearranging the glasses on her tray, her hands trembling slightly. Just another rich guy who thought he owned the world and everyone in it. She resolved to avoid that part of the room for the rest of the night. 2 days later, Lena was in the middle of the chaotic lunch rush at the daily grind. She was balancing 3 plates on one arm, weaving through the crowded tables, when the bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up. "Be with you in a sec," she called out, sliding the plates onto a table of hungry construction workers. When she turned back, he was there, standing just inside the door. The man from the gala. He looked utterly out of place. His dark, tailored suit was a stark contrast to the diner's worn linoleum floors and faded vinyl booths. The lunchtime crowd, a mix of office workers and laborers, fell into a brief, curious hush. He seemed to suck all the air out of the room, his presence a silent, powerful disruption. Lena's stomach did a nervous flip. She wiped her hands on her apron, her mind racing. What is he doing here? He walked towards the empty counter, his movements fluid and deliberate. He took a seat on one of the cracked red stools, his gaze fixed on her. "Hi," she said, her voice coming out a little sharper than she intended. She grabbed a menu and slapped it down in front of him. "What can I get for you?" A faint smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not here for the food." Lena crossed her arms, her defensiveness kicking in. It was a shield she had honed over years of dealing with unwanted advances. "Look, I'm at work. If you're not going to order anything, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "My name is Ji-hoon," he said, ignoring her dismissal. His voice was a low, smooth baritone that seemed to vibrate in the air between them. "Great, I'm busy," she retorted, turning to grab the coffee pot. This was creepy, beyond creepy. How had he even found her? Her catering company had strict privacy rules. The thought sent another chill down her spine. "I apologize if my presence is unsettling," he said, his tone perfectly even. "That was not my intention." His self-deprecation sounded practiced, yet there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Frustration, perhaps. He was a man unaccustomed to being on the back foot. Unsettling? A guy I don't know, who was staring at me at a party, somehow finds out where I work and shows up in the middle of my shift. No, not unsettling at all. "It's charming," she said, her sarcasm thick as the diner's gravy. He had the grace to look momentarily flustered. It was a crack in the polished armor, and it was strangely endearing. "My methods were direct. I apologize. I wanted to see you again." "Why?" The question was blunt, born of genuine confusion. Ji-hoon paused as if searching for an answer that would make sense to her, or maybe even to himself. "I'm not sure I can explain it." "Not yet." He looked around at the diner, at the chipped mugs and the buzzing fluorescent lights, then back at her. His gaze was intense, unwavering. "Have dinner with me." Lena laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving sound. "You're kidding, right? I don't know you. For all I know, you're a serial killer with a taste for expensive suits." "I'm not a serial killer," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching again. It was the ghost of a real smile. "That's exactly what a serial killer would say," she shot back. She topped up a customer's coffee, her movements jerky. Her mind was a whirlwind. This was insane. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Yet, despite her brain screaming at her to call the cops, there was a part of her, a foolish, romantic part she thought had died long ago. That was intrigued. No one had ever looked at her the way he did, as if she were the only person in the universe. "One dinner," he pressed, his voice softer now. "If after that you want me to leave you alone, I will. You have my word." She looked at him, really looked at him. At the intensity in his dark eyes, the loneliness she thought she saw lurking there. She thought of her mountain of debt, of her endless, exhausting days. What was the worst that could happen? A bad dinner? She had survived worse. "Fine," she sighed, grabbing a napkin and a pen. "One dinner, but you're not picking me up. I'll meet you there, and if you show up here again, I'm calling the police. Is that legal, by the way? How you found me?" A shadow passed over his face, so quickly she almost missed it. "It's complicated," he said. He took the napkin she scribbled an address on. A busy, well-lit Italian restaurant she could afford on her own if he decided to stand her up. "Tomorrow, 7. He stood, placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter, and walked out. The bell chimed, and he was gone. The diner seemed to exhale, returning to its normal level of noise and chaos. Lena stared at the $100 bill. It was more than she made in a whole day. She snatched it up, her heart pounding a frantic, uncertain rhythm. What have I just done? Ji-hoon returned to his car, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows that waited silently at the curb. Min-jun was in the driver's seat. Well? Min-jun asked, his expression carefully neutral. Ji-hoon sank into the supple leather of the passenger seat, a strange feeling blooming in his chest. It felt like victory. A small, personal victory that had nothing to do with contracts or rivals. Tomorrow. 7, he said, a real smile finally breaking across his face. It felt foreign on his own lips. He thought about her sarcasm, her defiance. In his world, women were either deferential or predatory, their motives transparent. Lena was neither. She had looked at him, at Kwon Ji-hoon, and seen nothing more than a potential creep. It was baffling. It was infuriating. It was the most refreshing thing that had ever happened to him. The next evening, Lena stood in front of her closet in a state of near panic. Chloe, her roommate, was perched on the bed watching with amusement. "Just wear the blue dress," Chloe said, gesturing to a simple but elegant wrap dress Lena had bought from a thrift store. "It's classy." "Classy for me is not the same as classy for a guy who wears a suit to a greasy spoon diner," Lena fretted, pulling at her hair. "What if he takes me somewhere else? What if this whole Italian place thing was a test? If he's a decent guy, he won't care what you're wearing. If he's a jerk, then you'll know right away and you can come home and we can order pizza and mock him," Chloe said logically. Win-win. Lena took a deep breath. Chloe was right. She put on the blue dress. It fit her well, accentuating her waist and falling gracefully to her knees. To suppress ignited in her chest. She took to suppress ignited in her chest. She took the subway to the restaurant, her anxiety warring with a strange sense of excitement. She was 10 minutes early, but he was already there, seated at a quiet corner table. He stood when he saw her, and the simple gesture of respect sent a warmth spreading through her. "You came," he said, his eyes sweeping over her. He looked genuinely relieved. "I keep my promises," she said, trying to sound nonchalant as she slid into the booth. Up close, without the barrier of a counter between them, he was even more intimidatingly handsome. She could see the faint scar near his eye more clearly now. It made him look less perfect, more human. The dinner was a surprise. She had expected him to be arrogant, to talk about his money and his important life. Instead, he asked about her. He asked about her dream of opening a bookstore, and he listened, truly listened, as she spoke about it, his chin resting on his hand, his dark eyes focused intently on her. She found herself opening up, telling him about her love for first editions, for the smell of old paper, for the idea of creating a sanctuary for people who loved stories as much as she did. "Why a bookstore?" he asked. "Because stories are important," she answered, surprised by her own earnestness. "They're a way to live 1,000 lives, to understand people you'll never meet. In a world that's so loud and fast, a bookstore is quiet. It's a place to breathe." He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "A place to breathe," he repeated softly, as if tasting the words. "I understand that." She, in turn, tried to learn about him, but he was a master of deflection. He talked about his work in vague terms: international logistics, market expansion. He spoke of traveling, of the different cities he'd seen, but never about what he actually did in them. He was a man made of carefully constructed walls. "And your family?" she asked, taking a sip of wine. His posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "My father is the chairman. My mother is involved in various charities." It was a textbook, sterile answer. "It is my duty to take over from my father. It has always been expected." Lena heard the word duty and expected and sensed the weight behind them. For the first time, she felt a sliver of empathy for this powerful, mysterious man. His cage might be gilded, but it was a cage nonetheless. As he walked her to the subway station after dinner, a comfortable silence settled between them. The city lights glittered around them, but for Lena, the brightest thing was the small, hopeful spark in her own chest. "I had a nice time," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "As did I," he said. He stopped just before the station entrance. "Allow me to take you home." She hesitated, the old wariness returning. "I thought we agreed." "I'm not asking to come up," he interrupted gently. "I just want to ensure you arrive safely." A black car, the same one from the diner, pulled up silently to the curb as if summoned by his thoughts. She looked from the car to his face. There was a sincerity in his eyes, a genuine concern that disarmed her. She nodded. The ride to Queens was quiet. When they pulled up in front of her building, she turned to thank him. Before she could speak, he reached out, his fingers gently brushing the stray strand of hair from her cheek, the same one he'd seen at the gala. His touch was feather light, but it sent a shockwave through her entire body. "Lena," he said, his voice low and intense, "I want to see you again." Her heart was pounding. All her carefully constructed defenses were crumbling. I work most nights. Then I will see you during the day. I will clear my schedule. Whatever it takes," he said, and she knew with a terrifying certainty that he meant it. That was the beginning. Ji-hoon was true to his word. He began to weave himself into the fabric of her life. He would show up at the diner for lunch, not in a suit anymore, but in casual, expensive sweaters that still made him stand out. He would sit at the counter and drink coffee for an hour, just watching her work, a quiet, solid presence in her chaotic world. He learned her regulars' names. He once helped her carry a heavy stack of boxes from a delivery truck, earning a surprised look from her boss. He took her on dates that felt like they were from a movie. Private viewings at art galleries, helicopter rides over the city at sunset, dinners in restaurants so exclusive they didn't have signs. He was showing her his world, the beautiful, sanitized version of it. Lena was dizzy with it all, but she fought to keep her feet on the ground. She knew this was a fantasy. She was Cinderella, and she was terrified of midnight. "This is a lot," she told him one afternoon as they walked through Central Park. A cashmere scarf he'd bought her wrapped around her neck. "Is it too much?" he asked, his expression serious. "I don't know what it is," she confessed. "I don't fit in your world, Ji-hoon. Everyone stares at me. They look at my dress, and they know it's not designer. They look at my shoes, and they know they're from a department store." He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking her hands in his. His were warm and strong. "I don't care about any of that. When I'm with you, I feel quiet, like in your bookstore." His vulnerability was a punch to the chest. It cracked her open, made her want to believe. Slowly, cautiously, she let him in. A flicker of a lost boy in the eyes of a flicker of a lost boy in the eyes of this powerful man. But the shadows were always there, at the edges. A phone call he would take, walking away from her, his voice dropping to a low, cold command in Korean, the way his driver, a man who was clearly more than a driver, would watch their surroundings with a hawk's vigilance. One evening, they were leaving a restaurant when a group of rough-looking men in a car slowed down as they passed. Ji-hoon's body had instantly shifted, placing himself between Lena and the car, his posture changing from a relaxed companion to a deadly predator in a heartbeat. The moment passed, the car drove on, but the chill of it lingered. "Who were they?" she had asked, her voice trembling. "No one," he had said, his face a grim mask. "Business rivals." The lie was thin, and they both knew it. The incident planted a seed of real fear in Lena's heart. She was falling in love with a man whose life was a mystery, a man who dealt with business rivals who looked like thugs from a mob movie. The breaking point came a few weeks later. He had invited her to his penthouse for the first time. It was a palace in the sky, all glass and steel and minimalist art, with a view that stretched out to the ends of the earth. It was beautiful, sterile, and lonely. They were standing on the balcony, the city a carpet of glittering lights below them. Lena leaned against him, her head on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe this could be real. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice tense. She looked up at him. The relaxed mood had vanished. His face was etched with a deep internal conflict. "My family's business, the Hanil Group," he began, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's not just shipping and technology. That's the face we show the world." Lena held her breath. She knew on some level what was coming. My grandfather built this empire from nothing after the war. He did things, necessary things, he called them. He fought for territory, he made alliances, he broke his enemies. My father continued it. The legitimate businesses are real, they are profitable. But they are funded and protected by the other side of our family, the side that deals in less reputable ventures. "What kind of ventures?" she whispered, her throat dry. He finally looked at her, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored her own growing dread. "Smuggling, extortion, violence. We are not the Mafia, not in the way you see in movies. We are a corporation, but we have a division that handles hostile negotiations. That ensures our interests are protected by any means necessary." The air went cold. The glittering city seemed to mock her. "And you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Are you part of that division?" He flinched, the word hitting him like a physical blow. He slowly rolled up the sleeve of his left arm. A long, jagged scar, far worse than the one on his face, ran from his wrist to his elbow. Hidden tattoos of dark, intricate patterns peeked out from under his cuff. "I was raised in this world, Lena. I have done things I am not proud of, things that were required of me, to protect my family, to secure my position as heir." He looked at her, his expression raw, desperate. "But I don't want that life anymore. Since I met you, it's the only thing I've wanted, to be free of it." Lena stepped back, away from his touch. Her mind was reeling. Every fear, every doubt she'd had came crashing down on her. This wasn't just a rich man from a powerful family. This was a man whose wealth was built on crime, on the suffering of others. The gentle, lonely man she had fallen for was also a kingpin, a man who had admitted to violence. "I know," he said, his voice ragged. He saw the horror in her eyes. "I know. It's monstrous." Tears pricked her eyes. "The men in the car, they weren't business rivals, were they?" He shook his head slowly. "They were a message from a family that feels we are encroaching on their territory." A sob escaped her lips. It was real. The danger was real. She was in love with a man who lived in a world of violence and fear. She thought of her simple life, her dream of a quiet bookstore. How could that ever coexist with this? "I wanted you to know," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I wanted you to know everything, because I am falling in love with you, Lena. And I can't do that on a foundation of lies." His confession, meant to bring them closer, had just blasted a canyon between them. She loved him. God, she loved him. But his world would swallow her whole. It would corrupt everything she was, everything she believed in. I have to go," she stammered, backing away towards the door. "Lena, please," he begged, taking a step towards her. "Don't. We can figure this out. I can change things." "How?" she cried, the tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "How do you change something like that? It's your family. It's your entire life." She turned and fled, leaving him standing alone on the balcony, the beautiful, empty city, his only witness. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into hell. She had flown too close to the sun, and now she was falling, her wings melted, her heart shattered. For a week, there was silence. Lena went through the motions of her life in a numb daze. The diner felt grayer, the customers more demanding, the exhaustion more profound. Chloe tried to comfort her, but Lena couldn't articulate the depth of her despair. How could she explain that the man she loved was part of a criminal empire? Ji-hoon, for his part, was in his own personal hell. Her absence was a physical ache, a hollowness that nothing could fill. He was short-tempered, ruthless in his business dealings, his cold mask firmly back in place. Minjun watched him with concern. He had never seen his boss so undone. Then Ji-hoon called. "My parents have requested to meet you," he said, his voice strained. "A family dinner, this Sunday." "Ji-hoon? No," Lena said immediately. "I can't." "Please," he said, and the desperation in his voice was her undoing. "Lena, this is important. This is the first step. For them to accept you, for me to show them that this is real. If I can make them understand, I can start to change things. Please, just give me this one chance." Against her better judgment, against every screaming instinct in her body, she agreed. Her love for him was a sickness, a hope she couldn't kill, and so she found herself in the Lion's Den, a private dining room at an exclusive restaurant so grand it made the gala look like a high school prom. She wore the blue dress again, feeling woefully inadequate. Ji-hoon's family was arrayed around the long mahogany table like a royal tribunal. His father, Chairman Kwon, was a formidable man with eyes like chips of ice. He regarded Lena with a look of cold appraisal, as if she were a line item on a balance sheet that didn't add up. His mother, elegant and coiffed, gave her a smile as thin and sharp as a razor blade. The dinner was an exercise in torture. The conversation flowed around her, a mix of Korean and English, deliberately designed to exclude her. They talked of business acquisitions, of political connections, of a world so far removed from hers it might as well have been on another planet. Lena sat in silence, picking at the exquisite food on her plate, feeling Ji-hoon's hand resting on her knee under the table, a small, desperate point of contact. As the main course was cleared, Mrs. Kwon turned to her husband. "I just don't understand the fascination, Yobo," she said in Korean, her voice carrying in the quiet room. "There are daughters from the Kim family, the Choi family, suitable girls." "Patience, my dear," the chairman replied, his eyes on his son. "Youthful rebellion takes many forms. It will pass." Lena understood enough Korean to catch the gist. Humiliation washed over her. She was a phase, a rebellion, a server, a girl not much older than her, wearing the same kind of professional mask Lena used to wear, approached the table with a silver coffee pot. Mrs. Kwon watched the girl for a moment, then looked pointedly at Lena, a cruel, calculating light in her eyes. It was then she delivered the final fatal blow, her voice dripping with condescension. "She's just the help," his mother said. The words landed and the world fractured, and as Ji-hoon stood, the silence that followed was not just an absence of sound, but the presence of his rage. He looked at his mother, his face stripped of all emotion save for a terrifying glacial fury. "Her name," he said, his voice low and lethally calm, "is Lena Park." He turned his gaze to his father, who was watching him with narrowed, angry eyes. "She is the woman I love, and she is worth more than every person in this room combined, including you." The chairman's face purpled with rage. "You forget your place, boy." "No," Ji-hoon countered, his voice ringing with a newfound authority. "I am finally remembering it, and it is not here, with you. Not if this is how you behave." He looked around the table at the shocked faces of his family and their cronies. "This dinner is over." He walked around the table to where Lena sat, frozen in her chair, tears silently tracking down her face. He gently took her hand and pulled her to her feet. "Let's go." He led her from the room, leaving behind a tableau of stunned silence and impotent fury. In the car on the way back to her apartment, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a profound, soul-crushing sadness. He had defended her. He had stood up to his entire family, to his terrifying father, for her. It was the grandest gesture she had ever witnessed, and it changed nothing. When they stood in front of her apartment building, she turned to him, her heart an open wound. "I can't," she whispered, the words tearing from her throat. "Ji-hoon, I can't live like that. I can't be the person who causes that kind of war in your family. I can't live in a world where I am constantly being judged, where there is danger around every corner. I'm not strong enough." "You are the strongest person I know," he said, his own voice thick with unshed tears. He reached for her, but she stepped back. "No, I'm not. My strength is for my world, not yours. Your mother was right in a way. I am just the help. I'm a waitress from Queens. I don't belong there." It was the most painful thing she had ever had to say, a betrayal of herself and of his beautiful defense of her. "Don't say that," he pleaded, his composure finally breaking. "Don't let them win. Don't let them do this to us." "They already have," she sobbed. "It's too much. I love you. I love you so much it hurts. But I can't do this. Goodbye, Ji-hoon." She turned and ran into her building, not looking back. She couldn't bear to see the look on his face. She stumbled up the stairs to her apartment, collapsed into Chloe's arms, and wept until she had no tears left. It was over. The fairy tale had ended, and midnight had struck. The days that followed were a gray, featureless landscape of misery. Lena went back to her 2 jobs. She picked up extra shifts. She worked until her body ached and her mind was too numb to think. But the numbness never lasted. In the quiet moments, his face would appear in her mind. The way he smiled, the intensity in his eyes, the feel of his hand in hers. Her life, which had once felt like a struggle for survival, now just felt empty. The color he had brought into her world was gone, leaving behind a monochrome existence that was infinitely worse than what she had before. She had known struggle, but she had not known true heartbreak until now. For Ji-hoon, the world had also lost its color. He threw himself into his work with a terrifying ferocity. He returned to the family business, but he was a changed man. The quiet authority he had displayed at the dinner had solidified into something harder, more resolute. He began to challenge his father not with teenage rebellion, but with cold, hard strategy. "We are overexposed," he stated in a board meeting, pulling up charts that showed the declining profitability and increasing risk of their illicit ventures. "The world is changing. Digital banking, international surveillance. The old ways are a liability. They are a cancer that will kill the entire organism." His father scoffed. "You sound weak. That girl has made you weak." "No," Ji-hoon said, his eyes like steel. "She made me see. We have enough legitimate capital to triple our investment in renewable energy and biotech. We can be a true global power, not just back-alley thugs with fancy suits. We can be clean." The chairman and the old guard resisted, but Ji-hoon was relentless. He worked with Min-jun, building alliances with the younger, more forward-thinking members of the organization. He used the very skills his father had taught him, ruthlessness, strategy, an understanding of weakness, to dismantle the old power structure from within. It was a war fought not with fists, but with spreadsheets, buyouts, and forced retirements. His grand gesture was not a single act, but a slow, brutal campaign. He systematically identified the most corrupt and violent elements of the Hanuel group. He sold off shell corporations, cut ties with criminal affiliates, and funneled the capital into legitimate, publicly traded enterprises. He forced his father's oldest and most dangerous lieutenants out, offering them golden parachutes they couldn't refuse, backed by threats they understood all too well. The final confrontation came 6 months after Lena had left him. Ji-hoon stood before his father in the chairman's office. "I have transferred your remaining shares into a trust," Ji-hoon said calmly. "You are retired, effective immediately. You will retain your title, your wealth, your honor, but your authority is gone. Hanuel Group is mine now, and it will be a legitimate company." Chairman Kwan stared at his son, a maelstrom of fury, shock, and a grudging, infinitesimal sliver of respect in his eyes. He had been outmaneuvered. His own son, using the weapons he had given him, had staged a coup. He had lost. "All this," the old man finally rasped, gesturing around the opulent office. "You would burn it all down." "For a waitress?" "No," Ji-hoon said, the first hint of emotion entering his voice. "I am rebuilding it, for me, so that I can be a man worthy of her." A month later, Lena was walking down a quiet street in a part of Brooklyn she'd been exploring. She'd finally paid off the last of her family's debt, working herself to the bone. She was tired, but she was free. She had started to allow herself to dream again, just a little. She passed a small dusty storefront with a "For Rent" sign in the window. It had a large picture window and good bones. Her heart gave a familiar, painful lurch. It would make a perfect bookstore. She was peering through the dirty glass, imagining shelves of books and cozy armchairs, when she heard a voice behind her. "It has good light." She froze. She knew that voice. It was etched into her soul. She turned around slowly. It was him. Ji-hoon. He wasn't in a suit or an expensive sweater. He was wearing a simple pair of jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. He looked thinner, and there were new lines of exhaustion around his eyes, but the eyes themselves were clear. There was no black car waiting at the curb. He was just a man, standing on a sidewalk in Brooklyn. "Ji-hoon," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Hello, Lena," he said, a small, tentative smile on his face. She didn't know what to say. 1,000 questions swirled in her mind. What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," he said simply. He took a step closer. "A lot has changed. The Hanil group is different now. It's clean. My father is retired. The men who threatened us, the world they represented, it's gone. I dismantled it." Lena stared at him, her mind struggling to comprehend the scale of what he was saying. He had done it. He had actually done it. He had changed his entire world. "I did it for me," he continued, his voice earnest, desperate for her to understand. "Because I couldn't live in that world anymore, but I hoped it would make me someone you could choose, someone who could deserve a place in your world, the quiet one." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. He hadn't come with a display of power or wealth. He had come with his change. He had come with his vulnerability. He had laid his entire reformed soul at her feet. She closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps. Her hands came up to cup his face, her thumbs tracing the lines of his jaw. He was real. He was here. "You were always worthy," she whispered, and then she kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision of 6 months of pain and longing, of heartbreak and hope. It was desperate and deep, a confirmation and a promise. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her tight against him as if he would never let her go again. It was a reunion, a homecoming, the end of their separation, and the explosive beginning of their future. All the noise of the city, of their pasts, of their broken hearts, faded away, leaving only the profound, perfect quiet between them. A year later, the bell above the door of the quiet corner chimed softly. Lena looked up from the book she was shelving and smiled. The small, dusty storefront was now a bright, welcoming bookstore filled with the scent of paper and coffee. Sunlight streamed through the large picture window, illuminating rows upon rows of books. Ji-hoon walked in, carrying a box of new arrivals. He wore a soft flannel shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing the faint, silvery traces of his old scars. He was still the chairman of the Hanil Group, a global powerhouse in green technology, but here, in her bookstore, he was just Ji-hoon. He was the man who helped her with inventory, who made her coffee in the mornings, who would sit in one of the cozy armchairs and read for hours, just to be near her. He set the box down and came over to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his gaze sweeping over the little world she had built, that they had built. "It's a good day," he murmured into her hair. She leaned back against him, her heart full. Her life was no longer a struggle. She had her dream, and she had the man she loved. He had found his redemption, not by erasing his past, but by building a better future. And she had found her safety, not by running from the world, but by finding a man who was willing to change his world for her. "Yes," she whispered, turning her head to kiss him. "It's a perfect day." In the quiet of the bookstore, surrounded by 1,000 stories, they were finally writing their own. This story teaches us that love is not merely about acceptance, but about inspiration. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself, even if it requires dismantling the world you once knew. True strength isn't about enduring a toxic environment. It's about having the courage to change it, both for yourself and for the person you love. Redemption isn't about forgetting the past, but about building a future that atones for it. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. It's a powerful reminder that our circumstances don't have to define our character, and that meaningful change, though difficult, is always possible when fueled by a powerful purpose. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel for more dramatic romances, and share it with someone who believes in the power of second chances. Now, we'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, tell us, do you think Lena was right to leave Ji-hoon after his confession, even though she loved him? Or should she have stayed and tried to fight for their relationship from the beginning? And for our next story, what would you like to see? A story about Min-jun, the loyal second-in-command, and his own unexpected romance. B. A prequel story about how Ji-hoon's father, Chairman Kwon, originally built his empire. Let us know your choice in the comments. We can't wait to read your thoughts.